posted something on Facebook a few days ago that really hit a nerve. Now, frankly, most of my posts go largely unnoticed. This one got over 2,200 reactions, likes, dislikes, whatever, nearly 600 shares. It was a post about Netanyahu, Trump, and why criticizing Israel's government is not the same as hating Jewish people, why criticizing our government isn't anti American. And then the responses started coming in. Now, some of my Jewish friends pushed back. They were concerned that I'd stir up anti Semitism, make the world less safe for Jews. Then the trolls arrived, the people that they were worried about, ugly memes that I wouldn't even dare repeat. Then someone claimed that the Talmud teaches Jewish people to defraud non Jews. That's when I deleted and I blocked the poster. Then another person told me that Islam is a satanic cult. So I deleted that and blocked that person. And since then, I've been sitting with all this, and I think I know why this post really resonated. We're exhausted. We are tired of being told to be quiet. We are tired of governments killing in our names and calling it patriotism. We are tired of religious leaders blessing wars and calling it faith. We are tired of being told that if we speak out, if we dare say this is wrong, we are bad Americans, bad Christians, bad Jews, we're anti Semites, or we're traitors. Even Jewish people who criticize Israel are being ostracized by their own communities. Now, this isn't an abstraction. I work with grieving people, and I have a client whose grief is not about death, it's about exile. She's been cut off from friends and family because she speaks out about what's happening in Gaza. She lost her community for telling the truth as she sees it. She's seen as not being a good Jew. That is its own kind of death, and it's happening everywhere. The message is consistent: stay in line, don't make waves, don't embarrass us. Silence is loyalty. And I reject that. Here's what I think a true patriot actually does. There's a version of patriotism that says, my country, right or wrong. And I don't believe in that version. A true patriot doesn't blindly follow his country. A true patriot wants to make his country right, even when that means standing against the government, especially then. And the same is true of faith. A true person of faith doesn't follow religious leaders into violence without question. A true person of faith goes back to the source, the actual teachings, the actual words, and asks, is this what we believe? Is this who we are? Now, this is a journey I took for several years before I eventually left Christianity. Because sometimes the answer is no, this is not what we believe. Sometimes the leaders are wrong. Sometimes the nation is wrong. Sometimes the institution, built in the name of God, has wandered so far from God that the most faithful thing you can do is to say so out loud. Sometimes you even have to leave. Let's talk about when prayer becomes a weapon. This week, Pete Hegseth stood at the Pentagon pulpit at a mandatory Christian worship service that civilian employees and uniformed military personnel were expected to attend, and he prayed. And it wasn't a prayer that most of us would recognize. He read from the Psalms: I pursued my enemies and overtook them. I did not turn back until they were consumed. I thrust them through so they were not able to rise. They fell under my feet. He then recited what he said was a chaplain's prayer from the mission to capture Venezuela's former president. Behold now the wicked who rise against your justice and the peace of the righteous. Snap the rod of the oppressor, frustrate the wicked plans, and break the teeth of the ungodly. By the blast of your anger, let the evil perish. And then this: let every round find its mark against the enemies of righteousness and our great nation. Give them wisdom in every decision, endurance for the trial ahead, unbreakable unity, and overwhelming violence of action against those who deserve no mercy. And he closed by asking God to let justice be executed swiftly and without remorse, that evil may be driven back and wicked souls delivered to the eternal damnation prepared for them. Now, this is the Secretary of Defense, or the Secretary of War, as he likes to call himself, using the Pentagon as a church, praying for death and damnation in the name of Jesus Christ. And I'm supposed to stay quiet about that? I'm supposed to nod along because criticizing might mean I'm not a good Christian or not a good American? No, I'm not doing that. As an aside, the people who cherry pick verses from the Quran or the Talmud to condemn those religions as violent are so self unaware that they forget these verses are in their Bibles and have been used to justify all sorts of atrocities. This is why I left. I grew up in the church. I know the Bible. I've read the Quran. I've studied the Torah, the Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching, and the teachings of Buddha. I have found profound, beautiful, life giving wisdom in every single one of them. I have also watched people use every single one of them to justify violence, indifference to injustice, oppression, exclusion, and hatred. And I made a decision, and I respect all those traditions, but I will not participate in any organized religion. Not because I don't believe in something larger than myself, I most certainly do, but because I refuse to let the 10% that we disagree on define my relationship with the other 90% that we do agree on. Let's talk about the 90% that we share. Pick any major religious tradition on earth. They all teach some version of this: love your neighbor, do not kill innocent people, care for the poor, treat others as you want to be treated. There's something sacred in every human being. Now, this isn't a guess, it's documented across Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Sikhism, etc. The core ethics are nearly identical. We agree on about 90% of what matters most, probably more. But we built the last 3,000 years of human conflict on the 10% that we disagree on: the dietary laws, the holy days, the name we use for God, Allah, God, whatever, whether salvation comes through faith or works, whether Jesus was divine or a prophet, whether Muhammad was the final messenger. We have tortured and enslaved and burned each other alive over all these questions, and men like Hegseth are still doing it, not with fire, but with bullets, and calling it prayer. Now, here's a story that gives me some hope. There's a congressman. His name is Mark Siljander. He was a congressman from Michigan in the 1980s. He was a hard right Reagan Republican, a staunch member of the religious right. He once walked out of the national prayer breakfast when a speaker quoted from the Quran. He believed that Islam was dangerous, so dangerous that he would not sit in the room while someone read from the Quran. And then he lost his reelection and he started actually reading. And he had what he called a paradigm crash after discovering that much of what he'd been taught about his faith was nowhere in the Bible, and that the Christian and Muslim religions. He had what he called a paradigm crash after discovering much of what he had been taught about his faith was nowhere in the Bible, and that the Christian and Muslim religious texts are surprisingly compatible when studied in their original languages. He came to realize that Islam and Christianity were not contradictory at their core as he had thought. He wrote a book about this. It's called A Deadly Misunderstanding: A Congressman's Quest to Bridge the Muslim Christian Divide. And the title wasn't just about Islam and Christianity, it was about all of us. And I read the book and it gave me hope. The deadly misunderstanding is the belief that the people on the other side of our theological 10% are our enemies, that our God wants us to defeat them, to break their teeth, to send their souls to eternal damnation. And that misunderstanding has been killing us for millennia. Here's what I actually believe. I do believe in something. I believe that consciousness doesn't end at death. I spent more than 3 decades studying the evidence: near death experiences, after death communications, mediumship, and I find the evidence to be compelling. I believe that love is the fundamental force of the universe. I believe that we are all connected at a level that makes that 10% seem almost absurd. I believe what Jesus actually said, not what empires and politicians later decided that he meant. I believe what Muhammad actually taught, not what has been distorted by those who want war. I believe what the mystics of every tradition have always known: that God or source or the divine, or whatever name you use, is not asking for overwhelming violence of action. That's a human invention, a very old, very dangerous one. Now, the tolls that hit my post didn't teach me anything new. When the anti Semitic meme showed up in my comments, I wasn't surprised by the memes. It was kind of the first time I had seen them used on my wall, but hateful people use whatever they can find. They use whatever thread they can find. Now, I didn't create the anti Semitism, I didn't feed it, but I did expose it. And I want to be very clear: I don't tolerate it. I blocked the comments, I deleted the comments, and I blocked the people. When someone said Islam was a satanic death cult, when someone said Islam was a satanic death cult, I thought of the 1.8 billion Muslims I've never met, most of whom are simply trying to live with integrity, to raise their children, and to find meaning in a world that doesn't offer easy answers. When I was told my criticism of Netanyahu was anti Semitism, I thought of the many Jewish voices who are also criticizing Netanyahu loudly, courageously, at great personal cost. Criticizing a government is not the same as hating a people. Criticizing Bibi Netanyahu or the Israeli government is not the same as criticizing Jews. Studying a religion honestly is not the same as endorsing everything done in its name. And praying for overwhelming violence is not the same as following the man who said, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Now, what would change if we focused on the 90% that we agree on? That's the question I keep asking. What would change in our politics, in our foreign policy, in our neighborhoods, in our comment sections if we led with what we share instead of what divides us? Now, I'm not naive. The 10% is real and the differences matter to people, which is one of the reasons that I will never join any religion. But I'm asking you to consider the cost of that 10%: the wars, the exiles, the clients I sit with who have lost their entire communities for speaking truth, the children in Gaza, the 150 or more schoolgirls killed in the school that we bombed in Iran, the children in Israel, the soldiers coming home broken, the families who never see their soldiers come home at all. Is the 10% worth all of that? I don't think it is. And I suspect in the quiet of your own heart, away from the noise and the tribalism and the trolls, neither do you. So, what I want to say to you is speak anyway. That's not disloyalty, that's love. Where have you felt silence for speaking what you believe is true?